Hopkins. So let's just get into it today.
Yeah.
Alt versus Fashanu. There's a good chance they could both be there at 7. Let's just say they are. We're going to do hypothetical purposes today. I know this is something you've looked into.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, Brad. I kind of outed myself. I was asking Red about Tyron Smith, but I said, how many of all of these tackles that people are just so excited about are even left tackles? Like Talise Fuaga or some of these guys, if you read their bio, it's like, expects to shift to the right, is really a right tackle. Might be I'm not using him as an example, but I am kind of using him as an example. He's been a right tackle. So a bunch of these guys are right tackles, and that's obviously also a very valuable position, but it's not left tackle. The two consensus guys that everybody continues to talk about, and they're not a guard like Skoronski, or they're not a right tackle like some of these other dudes, Alt and Fashanu. These are the two left tackles in the draft, the two big-ticket guys. Curious to get your thoughts on them. And for people, if maybe you're one of the 116 people who just moved here yesterday, Brad Hopkins was the starting left tackle for the Titans. For 12 of 13 years, you started at right on. Is this right? No, you took over your first year for a guy at left tackle, right?
Yep.
Okay, I remember.
Yep.
Just took me a second to process through it. So essentially a 13-year starter at left tackle, made Pro Bowls, did all that stuff, set the standard for playing left tackle for this organization when it moved here. And then they got Michael Roos, and he kept that thing going. And when Lawan was healthy, Lawan kept the thing going. And then it's just been a rudderless boat over there, since Lawan got hurt. So it feels like maybe they've got a chance to find their next U. But I'm curious what you think about these potential U's who they might draft.
So I'm going to read you my notes.
Okay.
I took these notes on Joe Alt, and I took these notes on Olu Fashanu. So Joe, when I looked at his tape, I saw an extremely smooth technician. Tremendous size, of course, 6'8". His wingspan is ridiculous. So those long arms are a definite benefit for him, right? I also loved his hip movement. It makes it very hard for edge rushers to get around the guy that's got great hips. When you say great hips compared to feet, that means you're athletic.
Right.
Okay? And he has that. He has tremendous pass sets. Now, what I didn't see was him blowing guys off the line of scrimmage when it comes to run blocking. Maybe, sometimes guys get leverage on you because you are so tall. Mm-hmm. But he does do well in zone blocking schemes. In other words, he's going to get a great fit with his guard, sometimes even the tight end, to then move up to the next level to be able to get to the linebacker level and take care of those would-be tacklers, because that's what the job of the front four is to do, is to keep their keep those avenues open for those linebackers to come screaming through the hole and make those great tackles. That's why they get most of the big bucks. But when I looked at Olu's tape, I saw Olu not near as technically sound. There's going to be some situations that he's going to need to address. He turns his shoulders a lot, okay? He bends over backwards a lot. In other words, guys that are shorter, and I say shorter, he's 6'6". Not
I was
short,
that short. Yeah.
Right. But what happens is when people come downhill to try and challenge you in a bull rush, are you going to be able to anchor? Mm-hmm. And he was able to hold his own in the college level. At the pro level, man, that might be more of an issue, because they're looking at the tape and they're seeing exactly how they can exploit your weaknesses. And if that is one way that they feel that they can get at you, other than getting you to turn your shoulders and giving them a two-way go. What I mean by turning your shoulders is when you think of the line of scrimmage, okay, just consider it being a straight line that goes from sideline to sideline. The more parallel that your shoulders are with that line of scrimmage, that's to your advantage, because the defensive end does not have a soft shoulder to go through if he's rushing up the field wide. In other words, you haven't turned your shoulders giving way to the quarterback. Your shoulders are pretty stout and pretty square. Same thing can be said about a guy that then decides to come down the line of scrimmage on an inside penetration. Your shoulders are already square, so you don't have to try and turn your hips and then readjust. You just ride them down into the guard, right? Or even past the guard center box and into the trash, and then you basically are you're well equipped to keep the integrity of the pocket. That's something that I saw was more of a challenge for Olu, and I know if I'm sitting there thinking it, defensive ends are going to be thinking it as well too, because all they got to do is sit around and watch tape, right? So when I compared the two, I just saw a guy here that I'm not going to say is generationally gifted, but he's generationally gifted because the guy played tight end, okay? He knew he was going to play tackle because his body just kept growing and kept growing and kept growing. And, in counsel with his father, who also was a tight end, switched to tackle. and the fact that you're speaking to a tight end switch to tackle, because I got my scholarship to Illinois as a tight end, and I just ate my way to tackle. I love telling that story. But the point is, this guy has athleticism in his DNA and in his background. So I would assume that this guy that has great feet, good hips, great long arm length, the size it means everything in the NFL, especially up front. So I want him to play stronger, which he will. And I also want him to continue working with Bill Callahan to make sure he's in the proper position. So if I'm comparing the two, it's not apples and oranges. It's almost like a Washington red apple and a green apple.
Different kinds of apples. Yeah.
Different kinds of apples, but they're both apples. So I would assume if someone doesn't make a run on Alt before we get to Joe at number 7, which I'm not assuming there will be, because as a matter of fact, let me get on my draft board. I have the Giants, who are before the Titans, taking Jerzon Newton from Illinois.
Oh,
yeah, I got him. And at number 5, I've got the Chargers taking Kool-Aid McKinstry, despite the Jones fracture that he's dealing with. I'm sure that that's something that he can probably get right before camp starts. So I think that he's probably the best, at least not one of the best cornerbacks on the draft board. And the Chargers will be looking to get a cornerback or a running back. Obviously, looking at the pieces that they have lost since. So, and Jim Harbaugh's looking to add any kind of weaponry he can to Justin and make sure that he's good to go. That's probably one of the reasons why he even decided to take the job, because he loves Justin Herbert so much. But when you're looking at the availability of tackles in the draft, and that being the most subsequent thing that we need to address first and foremost, get yourself a guy that he, along with Peter Skoronski, kind of playing their college ball within 100 miles of each other. South Bend ain't that far from Northwestern.
Right.
So they kind of speak the same language of sorts. And I think that these two can have a nice congenial relationship and learn from one another and be the left side of this offensive line for the next, 10, 11, 12 years.
Brad Hopkins, again, hanging out for Blaine. There's always talk about different prospects, and for Fashanu and Alt, which I heard an interview with Fashanu, and he said, it's Fashanu, so I thought I had to remember that. I want to say Fashanu, but he said Fashanu. Then he said his first name, and I thought, I'm just going to call him Olu, because he said the whole thing, and there's some twists and turns in there I don't feel comfortable with. But all of these, draft guys who tell you everything about the draft, it's like Alt is more ready today. But Fashanu is probably more athletic and has more upside. Like in years, he may be better. So my question for you would be, again, as a guy who played the position as well as anybody could play it for over a freaking decade for this team, where do you fall on maybe this guy's at his ceiling, but he's already there, and maybe this guy's not where he is, but his ceiling could be higher? Where do you kind of fall on those type of evaluations?
That's a great question, but how high is that ceiling for a guy that's tickling the ceiling? Is it a 12-foot ceiling already? You see what I'm saying?
Well, if it is, Javon could take it. Yeah.
Right. Well, no doubt about that. We'll talk about the freak during the break, but the point is, if this guy's ceiling is so extraordinary,
right,
how much better do you actually need him to be versus a guy like, let's just say, Amarius Sims? You just mentioned him. The guy's got 8 snaps starts rather.
Right. Mims, yeah.
Yeah. So Mims, I said Sims. Mims. Regardless, there's still some development for this player that people feel, if he's considered one of the top 10 tackles with as little sample sizes as we've seen, Mickey, good guy. The guy must have the potential to be pretty good.
Oh.
Okay? And I'm going to tell you this. I didn't know what the run or the shoot was in the run and shoot offense, but when I got drafted to a team that needed to replace Don Maggs, who then went to Denver as a free agent, I was learning on the fly. I was just blessed enough to play my first year as a rookie next to Mike Munchak. And then when Mike Munchak decided to hang up the cleats, guess who I got for the next 10 years? Number 74, Bruce Matthews. So I was lucky enough to learn the game and the nuances, the minutia about the position from 2 guys that were playing it alongside of me. There was a lot more development that needed to be had in me because, like I just said, I came to college as a tight end. Blocking just became something natural to me because I played the game as if I was keeping you out of the paint. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So I was playing basketball with these guys out there, and I was quick enough to be able to do it.
You
in
had the
that
feet
fashion.
to do it.
Yes. But did I know anything about offensive line play, hand placement, pad level, You know what I mean? That kind of stuff, getting your face up to see what you're hitting. You know, being explosive off the line of scrimmage and really kind of initiating that contact and taking a guy where you want him to go. That was something I had to learn later on, even as a professional. So I can see what you're saying as far as developing those younger players that do have that tremendous upside. But when you've already got a guy that's, you know, that checks off most of the boxes, which in my opinion, Joe does, okay, is there going to be some things for him to learn? Of course. He's not going to step in there like a Tony Baselli and all of a sudden get to the Pro Bowl in his first year. I mean, he could, depending on how this offense performs. But I just see him being a better fit just because of his athleticism, his size, which is tremendous, and how Brian might even use him, because pass setting is more of his asset, if you will. And I would assume that you're going to see less, like Rhett was saying, 3 yards in a cloud of dust with Brian Callahan's offense moving forward.
And it's funny because we were discussing this just a little bit, maybe even with Buck and Lucas before they left. I don't remember. It wasn't on the air, but people are like, oh, they've got Callahan now. They're just going to throw it all over the yard. Not necessarily. He said, we're going to do what it takes to win the game. If it's throw more, if it's run more. I look at this almost as just when they throw, maybe they'll throw smarter. And maybe they'll use the running backs differently, other than I'm going to take the ball and I'm going to hand it to Derrick Henry while all of you are here to tackle him. Some short passes. Like if you watch the Bengals running backs, they don't just hand them the ball. They're more creative in the ways. They give guys more chances to make plays. Maybe that's what this offense can do, because they just turned and handed it to the running backs. There hasn't been a lot of creativity. So maybe they'll catch more passes. And, you know, we kind of heard that, Tajay Spears, we can use him a million different ways. Well, then they really didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't super creative with that.
Well, I'll put it this way. As a boxer, if I've got a tremendous jab and I keep connecting with that jab and you can't do anything, well, I don't need to come with the overhand all that often because I'm just peppering you with this jab. You know what I mean? I don't need to expose myself with opening up and hitting yourself with a big punch and so you can knock me out. And that's what a run game does for you. If I've got a front five, and throw tight end in there too, a front six that's controlling the line of scrimmage, and I'm getting manageable down and distances. See, that's what this game is about. It's about down and distance. 3rd and 10 is a no-no.
Boy, they've
That's
had a lot of no-nos
deal,
for the last couple of years.
So what helps you on 3rd down? The first 2. So if I'm getting gains in the first 2 yards, in the first 2 attempts, right, then that means that the playbook is more expansive to me on that 3rd down situation, because now you don't know if I'm passing it, if I'm running it, if I'm play actioning it. You don't know what I'm doing with it because I have a number of things that I can do with this manageable down and distance. So for me, I play Madden all the time. I'm sure you do too, right? As an offensive coordinator, my X's very rarely see the ball unless I'm in those type situations. My slot receiver, my tight ends, my running back even coming out of the backfield, those are more of my pass receivers. Plus, the run game is always established. I like to run some toss sweeps every now and then, but for the most part, I love to run between the tackles. If I've got a set where I've got just a typical 4-3 front, 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers, meaning that there's probably edge rushers that are outside the tackles. You probably got a tilted or shaded 3 technique over the guards, meaning there's gaps between each one of those guys. I'm figuring out where I'm going to sneak my running back in to not hit the home run, Mickey, but to get gains of like 4, 5, 6 yards. 2nd down, I'm doing the same thing. So if I'm looking at 3rd and 1, I've got everything in my playbook open to me to be able to do. And you've got to be able to defend all of that. You see? So that's the way I would assume, like you were just talking about, Brian Callahan would want to run an offense being less predictable. No offensive coordinator wants to be guessed what they do, and then all of a sudden the defensive coordinator is guessing right every single time.
Right.
They don't want that.